4 hours after Uhuru Kenyatta was declared president-elect by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, the National Council of Churches, NCCK, has called for constitutional amendments to ensure more Kenyans are not left out of the electoral process. This comes even as a section of civil society called for Kenyans to be spared the campaign mood for at least a year.
With IEBC declaring Uhuru Kenyatta president-elect, the NCCK has spoken out on concerns that a section of Kenyans are increasingly feeling frustrated with the winner-takes-all political process that tends to breed animosity and resentment.
These divisions are expressions of unresolved grievances and perceptions of exclusion and denial of dignity for the opposition by the arrangement of power as defined in the Constitution of Kenya 2010.
NCCK has now proposed constitutional amendments that will bring inclusivity in parliamentary and other political processes for the benefit of all Kenyans, regardless of their political inclinations.
We recommend that Kenyans, through Parliament, amend the Constitution of Kenya 2010 to provide for A, an expansion of the executive to provide for the president to appoint a prime minister and 2 deputies as part of the executive of the winning party or coalition.
Other proposals by the NCCK include restoration of the post of official leader of opposition and his deputy in the constitution.
These positions would be occupied by nominees of the political party or coalition which meets a set criteria, who may be the presidential candidate and running mate who obtain the second highest number of votes in a presidential election.
Civil society groups, though questioning results of the just concluded repeat poll, insisted that Kenyans need to be given time off politics to heal from the rigors of the prolonged campaigns and the turmoil that accompanied it.
In our estimation, we need a minimum of 1 year to put together an independent, credible election management body. And so it is in the space of that 1 year that we are asking Kenyans to consider what their options are. And that is another sovereign decision of the Kenyan people that needs to be canvassed and discussed. So we are not calling for a coalition government. We need to make that clear.
At the same time, professionals from Meru and Tharaka Nithi also weighed in on the ongoing conversations on post-poll national unity.
At the end of the proposed national dialogue, Kenyans, as I've already said, should feel they will not be left behind in the next 5 years and beyond. In other words, the dialogue should not be aimed at distributing posts and goodies to satisfy a few individuals' selfish interests.
They spoke as the NASA team dug in, vowing to give the ruling team sleepless nights until their demands are met. Mark Namaswa, KTN News.
We have that on the dailies as well, and as we can see right here on the Standard, NCCK proposes an inclusive executive, and well, that would be interesting to have an all-inclusive executive. One of the things that has been faulted in our system so far is the winner-takes-it-all model that we have.
Certainly so, Mike, and I was just smiling when I look at that news because I had the privilege of serving at the Committee of Experts in 2010. The mandate of the Committee of Experts, under the then chairperson Zamba Gitonga, was to compare the 3 drafts. The Bomas draft, which was unanimously passed by the delegates, the Wako draft, and thereafter come with a harmonized draft. In its final recommendations at that time, the Committee of Experts recommended a parliamentary system of government, where we will have a national president who more or less was like a symbol of unity, elected by the people directly, and thereafter a prime minister who was the leader of the largest political party or coalition of parties in parliament, and deputy prime ministers. That was the system which was proposed at that time. And NCCK, which was part of the churches at that time, opposed this proposal. They were insisting that Kenyans' sovereign rights to directly elect a president should not be watered down. And thereafter, when the draft was taken to Naivasha by the Parliamentary Select Committee on the Constitution, chaired by Honorable Abdikadir Mohammed at that time, They were convinced by the church leadership that Kenya was purely, the people had wanted a presidential system. And therefore, those provisions which are now being called for, the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, was scrapped off. And that is how we ended up with a purely presidential system, which winner takes all.
Is that the solution, though, the expansion of the executive? Because the clergy makes it clear it's not really under some party arrangement. It's just an arrangement to ensure that there is all more inclusivity, more communities taking part in leadership. But taking a look at what the opposition is running for and the underlying reasons they state for what they're doing what they're doing, they say it's not really about the power. It's about the underlying issues, the electoral injustices in our country, the institutional injustices in our country. Is this really the solution for the problem the country is in?
I think the grievance comes out that it still comes out to the elephant in the room, which is the presidency. The presidency is still endowed with a lot of power to be able to influence, either directly or indirectly, most of the institutions. And particularly in this instance, there have been those claims that the IEBC has been under the manipulation or influence of the executive arm of government. So therefore, and some certain other legal philosophers have said this, when you have a situation of a bitterly contested presidential election, whereby the votes are almost split into half, like on August 8th, you saw Honorable Uhuru had about 8 million votes. Raila had about 6.56 million votes. So you find that in this system where the winner takes all, the winner takes the presidency. And the runner-up, even if you had as many votes or as nearly as possible as the winner, then you end up with nothing. You are not in parliament, you are not in Senate, you are out in the political code for another 5 years.
And I think that's where really we need to have this conversation as a country, because when we look at, if the August 8th results of the election is anything to go by, then we certainly have Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga almost split in the middle.
Oh, yes.
Then what happens is that if Uhuru Kenyatta becomes president, then it feels like all that NASA represent basically goes down the drain in terms of influencing and having the country move forward. So I think it's a conversation that we honestly need to have, such that now there needs to be some form of inclusion of the other half.
Yes, certainly so. And that is where the NCCK, they're coming up with these proposals of expanding the executive to make provision for those cabinet positions. But I think merely amending the constitution to expand the executive is not a solution in itself. The grievances outlined by NASA are very deep institutional and governance issues. So I think fundamentally that dialogue should be all covering all of those aspects. Issues of electoral fairness, issues of the system of government, the structure of the executive, issues of security, which was highlighted out, and even the issues of corruption. So I think that dialogue should be all expanded, not necessarily providing for positions for people to occupy them. That will just have been plastic.
Yes. More of a creation of jobs or creation of spaces just to accommodate people. But interesting article here on page 8, just before we take a break. IEBC grants access to servers. Finally, what is it, 2 months or is it 3 months after that order by the Supreme Court? So the Commission has finally opened its servers, its transmission servers for scrutiny by candidates in the October 26th repeat election. This, of course, was after, what was it called, a process by the Otimofo company to upgrade this election material. So it's not quite clear whether information on the August 8th election would be on this. But servers have been opened. Talk to us about the credibility of the IEBC in conducting this election, because they've tried very much to portray that they are free, they are fair, they are transparent. The results that came out of this election, Raila Uhuru Kenyatta, rather, 7.4 million votes, and they say that was all verified, free, fair, and credible.
Certainly so. With regard to the way votes were tallied from the polling stations, and thereafter the returning officers coming to the National Center and having those results verified, it does appear that they were trying to be in strict conformity to what the Supreme Court directed, that that process has to be verifiable. But in terms of the IT infrastructure, I think there were several instances where IEBC shot itself in the foot. Because one, you'll find a situation whereby one of the commissioner will come out before the media, local and international, and say that they were not able to rely on the information coming from their KM's kit in terms of telling the voter turnout. I mean, these kits are kits whereby the country invested 2 billion plus for them to help. So where they're coming out and saying that they are not relying on the KM's kit to predict voter turnout and they are relying on the Forms 34B to do a manual kind of prediction of the voter turnout, it does show that IB still did not have enough competence and faith in the IT systems that they put in place. So for only that one reason, I think there was a loss of confidence, and even people questioned, because at first the chairperson said the predicted voter turnout was 48%, and thereafter he later came down and scaled it downwards and downwards to the 38.8% that I think we had. Yes.
And again, still on credibility, one would ask the question, why open the servers now, especially after the election? It would have been better to possibly have them open even before the 26th election for reason or verification purposes. So opening it now, one is left wondering, was there some, doctoring that was going on? And of course, that now leaves the chair to explain as to why this would be necessary right now.
Oh, yes. It's an incident of too little, too late, because initially this was a hot issue. NASA had wanted those servers full access to be granted so that they can be able to also bring in their own experts. But then IEBC at that time they say that some of those servers and some of those kits were being formatted and such like. There was the excuse that those servers are not hosted locally and such like. So I think IEBC has been indicted in this instance for dragging its feet and for not really sticking to the constitutional obligations. Access to information is a constitutional information. It ought to have done that without necessarily delaying it.
All right, but of course, the IEBC was pretty much trying to redeem themselves in this election. Yes. And we've seen a lot of things being done different, all the way from verification to the releasing of the information on the servers very quickly after this election. So we'll be talking about the implications of that in just a moment, but let's take a short break now.
Yes, we're going to take a short break. It's now 28 minutes after 6. This is Morning Express, and when we come back, we'll give you more details of what we have in the dailies. Do stay with us. And just a quick reminder, you're welcome to participate in the show, and you can do that via social media. We take a break. We'll be right back.